Korean Mafia boss told his wife, "I slept with the maid. If you can't handle it, leave." Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and smash that like. Drop a comment below telling me which state you're watching from. Are you in California, Texas, New York, Florida? Maybe watching from overseas? I want to know where all my people are tuning in from today. Let's build this community together and get into this powerful story. Now, let's begin. The words sliced through the silence of their penthouse like a blade forged in ice. "I've been sleeping with Sun Hee. If you can't handle it, pack your things and leave." Min Jung Park stood frozen in the kitchen of their luxury Seoul high-rise, her hands still gripping the delicate ceramic bowl she had been carefully drying. Her husband, Jae-won Kang, stood across from her with his arms folded across his chest, his expression as cold and unfeeling as the bitter winter wind howling against the floor-to-ceiling windows behind him. Sun Hee, their live-in housekeeper, the young woman Min Jung had personally interviewed, hired, trained with endless patience, and treated like a member of their own family for the past 2 years. But Jae-won had absolutely no idea who he was really dealing with. He had no concept of the woman standing before him, the woman he had just betrayed in the most devastating way possible. He thought she was soft. He thought she was weak. He thought she would crumble at his feet and beg him to stay. He thought wrong. What happened next will make you question everything you think you know about power, loyalty, betrayal, and the quiet, devastating fury of a woman who absolutely refuses to be broken. The late afternoon sunlight filtered through the expansive floor-to-ceiling windows of the Kang residence in the most prestigious district of Gangnam, casting long golden shadows across the imported Italian marble floors. The apartment smelled faintly of jasmine and sandalwood, the signature scent that Min Jung had carefully cultivated throughout their home over the course of their 12 years of marriage. Every detail of this penthouse reflected her touch. The fresh flowers arranged precisely on the entryway table, the artwork selected with an expert eye, the atmosphere of refined elegance that guests always remarked upon. Min Jung stood at the kitchen island, her movements precise and practiced as she arranged ingredients for Jae-won's favorite meal. Galbi Jim, with hand-selected short ribs from the finest butcher in Apgujeong, prepared exactly the way his mother had taught her during the early years of their marriage. Her black hair was pulled into an elegant chignon at the nape of her neck, and she wore a cream silk blouse tucked into tailored charcoal wool trousers. Diamond studs glinted at her ears, a 10th anniversary gift from Jae-won, back when such gestures still carried meaning. Everything about her appearance spoke of refinement, of quiet dignity, of a woman who carried herself with impeccable grace despite whatever storms might be raging beneath the surface. What most people didn't know, what Jae-won himself seemed to have conveniently forgotten over the years, was that Min Jung had built her own empire long before she ever met him. Park Medical Technologies, the biotech company she had founded at the age of 26 with nothing but a brilliant mind and an iron will, now held patents worth billions of won. Her innovations in diagnostic equipment had revolutionized early cancer detection across Asia. She had been featured on the cover of Forbes Korea before her 30th birthday. When she married Jae-won, she had stepped back from the daily operations of her company, allowing her carefully selected board of directors to manage things while she embraced the role of the supportive wife. She had believed she was building a partnership, a life shared between equals who would lift each other toward greater heights. She had been so naive. At precisely 6:15 in the evening, Min Jung heard the private elevator chime, announcing her husband's arrival. His footsteps echoed across the marble floors of the entryway, heavy and deliberate. She noticed immediately that he didn't call out a greeting as he usually did. He didn't come to the kitchen to kiss her cheek or ask about her day. Instead, she heard him walk directly to the bar in the living room. The clink of crystal, the splash of expensive whiskey being poured. Something was wrong. She could feel it in the air, a shift in pressure like the moments before a storm breaks. Min Jung wiped her hands on a pristine white towel and walked toward the living room, her expression warm and welcoming despite the unease coiling in her stomach. "Dinner's almost ready," she said softly, offering him a gentle smile. "I made galbi Jim, your favorite." Jae-won stood by the bar, the glass of whiskey already half empty. He was still wearing his charcoal gray suit, the one that had been custom-tailored in Milan. His tie was loosened, his top button undone. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and there was a tension in his jaw that she recognized from the worst periods of his business dealings. He set down the glass with a sharp clink against the marble bar top and turned to face her. His eyes were empty of warmth, empty of the affection that had once made her feel cherished and protected. "We need to talk." Her stomach tightened further, but her expression remained calm and open. She had learned long ago to never show weakness, even when she felt it most acutely. Of course. What's on your mind? Jaewon crossed his arms over his chest and looked at her with an expression she had never seen before. Cold detachment mixed with something that almost resembled contempt. I've been sleeping with Sun-hee. The words hung in the air between them like poison gas, invisible but lethal. Min-jung felt the floor shift beneath her feet. Surely she had misheard. Surely this was some kind of terrible joke. Sun-hee, he repeated, his tone flat and matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing a business acquisition rather than the destruction of their marriage. Our housekeeper. It's been going on for 8 months now. And honestly, Min-jung, if you can't handle that reality, the door is right there. Feel free to use it. Her breath caught in her throat. 8 months, while she had been hosting dinner parties for his business associates, smiling graciously as she played the role of the perfect hostess, while she had been accompanying him to charity galas and corporate functions, her hand resting elegantly on his arm, while she had been managing every detail of their household with meticulous care, ensuring his comfort, anticipating his needs, building what she believed was a life together. He had been betraying her with the young woman who lived under their roof, the woman Min-jung had trained and trusted and treated with kindness. You're joking, Min-jung whispered, though she could see from the hard set of his jaw that he was completely serious. Do I look like I'm joking? Jaewon's voice carried an edge of impatience, as if her shock was an inconvenience. I'm telling you the truth because I'm done hiding. Sun-hee makes me feel alive. She makes me feel like a man. You? He let out a short, bitter laugh. You make me feel like I'm suffocating. The cruelty of the words was worse than the confession itself. He wasn't asking for her forgiveness. He wasn't begging her to understand, to work through this together, to save what they had built. He was informing her of his decision as if she were an employee receiving a termination notice, as if their 12 years together, their vows, their history, meant absolutely nothing. Suffocating, Min-jung repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. I've given you 12 years of my life. I stepped back from my company to support your ambitions. I stood beside you through everything, through your father's scandal when the whole world turned against your family, through the corporate restructuring that nearly destroyed your business, through every crisis and challenge this family has ever faced. And you feel suffocated. And I appreciate that, Jaewon said, his tone carrying the hollow politeness of a man thanking a servant for adequate service. I really do, but gratitude isn't love, Min-jung. I'm grateful for a good meal. I'm grateful for efficient household management. That's not the same as passion. Sun-hee understands me. She looks at me like I'm something special. She doesn't judge me or expect me to be something I'm not. She just accepts me. Min-jung felt her fingernails digging into her palms as she fought to maintain her composure. The urge to scream, to throw something, to release the tsunami of emotions crashing inside her chest was almost overwhelming. But she had learned long ago that losing control only gave power to those who wanted to see you fall. So what exactly are you proposing? She asked, her voice steady despite the trembling she felt inside. A divorce? Jaewon tilted his head slightly, as if genuinely considering the question for the first time. I haven't decided yet. To be honest, divorce would be messy. The press would have a field day. The business implications would be significant. My mother would be devastated. He paused, then shrugged. Maybe we just adjust our arrangement. You keep your position, your social status, your lifestyle, all the privileges that come with being Mrs. Kang. I keep Sun-hee. We maintain appearances in public and in private. We each do what makes us happy. It's a practical solution. A practical solution, Min-jung echoed, her voice hollow with disbelief. You want me to remain married to you while you openly carry on an affair with our housekeeper. You want me to smile at charity events and host dinner parties while you're sleeping with another woman under our roof. That's your proposal? I want you to be realistic about our situation. He stepped closer, and for a moment, his expression softened into something that might have been mistaken for concern if she didn't know better. We're both intelligent adults. We both understand how the world works. Divorce would be ugly and expensive in public. This way, everyone wins. You maintain your social position. I get what I need emotionally. Sun-hee is taken care of. No scandals, no lawyers, no division of assets. It's the smart play. Min-jung stared at the man she had married 12 years ago. The man who had stood before her at the altar and sworn to love and cherish her. The man she had trusted with her heart, her future, her very sense of self. And she realized with sudden crystalline clarity that she didn't know him at all. Perhaps she never had. Something shifted inside her in that moment. Not the breaking she might have expected, the shattering of her heart into a million irreparable pieces. Instead, it was something harder, colder, more purposeful, like steel being forged in fire. Fine. Jae-won's eyebrows lifted in genuine surprise. Fine. You heard me. Min-jung's voice was steady as bedrock. If that's how you want to play this, then fine. I understand perfectly. A smile of satisfaction spread across his face, the smile of a man who believed he had negotiated a favorable deal. Good. I'm glad you're being sensible about this. I knew you'd see reason eventually. You've always been the practical one. Min-jung didn't respond. She simply turned back toward the kitchen and began methodically covering the dishes she had so carefully prepared. Her movements were precise, unhurried, betraying nothing of the storm raging inside her mind. Jae-won grabbed his coat from the closet by the door. I'm going out. Don't bother waiting up. Where are you going? The question came automatically, though she already knew the answer. Does it matter? I suppose not. He paused at the door, glancing back at her with an expression that might have been pity or contempt. She could no longer tell the difference. You know, Min-jung, maybe if you'd been a little warmer over the years, a little more attentive, we wouldn't be in this situation. Something to think about. He left before she could respond. The door closed with a soft click that somehow felt more final than a slam. The private elevator hummed as it carried him away. Silence. Min-jung stood alone in the kitchen of her beautiful penthouse, surrounded by the dinner she had prepared with love and care, and felt the last remnants of her old life crumble to dust. Then she pulled out her phone, scrolled through her contacts, and stopped at a name she had saved years ago, but never thought she would need. Detective Inspector Yoon Sang-chul, Anti-Corruption Division, Seoul Metropolitan Police. She pressed dial. The phone rang twice before a deep, professional voice answered. Inspector Yoon speaking. Inspector Yoon, this is Min-jung Park. We met 5 years ago regarding some irregularities I discovered during a due diligence review. There was a brief pause. Mrs. Kang. Yes, I remember you well. I've often wondered if you would call. I need to meet with you tomorrow morning, if possible. May I ask what this concerns? Min-jung looked around her pristine kitchen, at the covered dishes that would never be eaten, at the life she had built that was now nothing more than an elaborate lie. I'm ready to share everything I know about my husband's business operations, everything I've kept quiet about for the past 5 years. I believe you'll find it very interesting. Another pause, longer this time. When Inspector Yoon spoke again, his voice carried a new intensity. I'll clear my schedule. Come to the Uido district office at 9 o'clock. Ask for me at the front desk. I'll be there. She ended the call and set her phone on the counter. Then, with deliberate care, she picked up the plates of galbi-jjim, the meal she had spent hours preparing, the meal that represented everything she had tried to be as a wife, and scraped every bit of it into the trash. When the dishes were washed and put away, when the counters gleamed and the kitchen was spotless, Min-jung poured herself a glass of wine from a bottle she had been saving for a special occasion. She walked out onto the penthouse balcony and looked out at the glittering lights of Seoul, spreading beneath her like a carpet of stars. The city looked beautiful tonight, cold and beautiful and full of possibility. Jae-won Kang had no idea what he had just set into motion. He had looked at his wife and seen a dutiful homemaker, a social accessory, a woman who would accept whatever crumbs he deigned to throw her way. He had never bothered to see the brilliant entrepreneur who had built an empire from nothing, the strategist who had navigated the cutthroat world of Korean business and emerged victorious, the woman who kept meticulous records of everything, because she understood that information was the ultimate currency of power. He would learn soon enough, and by the time he understood who he had betrayed, it would be far too late. Across the city, in a modest studio apartment in the Mapo district, Soon-hee Kim stood before a full-length mirror and admired her reflection. She wore a new designer dress, Valentino, straight from the Galleria boutique, that Jae-won had purchased for her just last week. It cost more than her mother made in 6 months working at the fish processing plant back in Busan. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Jae-won told her everything. She took it better than expected. See you in an hour. Sun-hee smiled, a slow, satisfied curve of her lips. For 8 months she had played her role perfectly. The humble housekeeper, bowing respectfully to the lady of the house, murmuring words of gratitude for every small kindness, hiding her true feelings behind a mask of servitude. Min-jung had never suspected a thing. She was too busy with her charity committees and social obligations to notice what was happening right under her own roof, too confident in her position as the wife to imagine that a simple housekeeper could ever be a threat. That was her mistake. Sun-hee had recognized the opportunity the moment she started working in the Kang household. Jae-won was handsome, wealthy, powerful, and clearly unhappy in his marriage. His wife was cold, distant, always preoccupied with something other than him. He needed someone who would make him feel desired, important, alive. Sun Hee was more than happy to be that someone. It had started innocently enough. A lingering glance across the dinner table, an accidental brush of hands when she served him his morning coffee, a conversation that lasted a few minutes longer than it should have. Jae-won had confided in her about his frustrations, his loneliness, his sense that life was passing him by while his wife built her own little kingdom of committees and causes. Sun Hee had listened. She had sympathized. She had touched his arm and told him he deserved to be happy. After that, everything happened naturally. She heard the knock at her apartment door and opened it with a welcoming smile. Jae-won stood in the hallway, still wearing his expensive suit, a bottle of Dom Perignon in his hand. "We're celebrating," he said, pulling her into a kiss. "The hardest part is over." Sun Hee led him inside, her mind already racing ahead to the future they would build together. Once the divorce was finalized, once Min-jung was out of the picture, she would take her rightful place at Jae-won's side. No more hiding. No more sneaking around. She would be Mrs. Kang, living in that beautiful penthouse, wearing designer clothes every day, attending galas and parties as the wife of one of Seoul's most powerful men. "What did she say?" Sun Hee asked, settling onto the couch beside him. "When you told her?" Jae-won shrugged, popping the champagne cork with practiced ease. "She said fine. That's it. Just accepted it like I told her we were out of milk." Sun Hee laughed, though something about that response nagged at the back of her mind. That's so typical of her, cold as ice, even when her marriage is falling apart. "That's exactly what I mean." Jae-won poured 2 glasses and handed her one. "She doesn't feel anything. She just calculates and manages and controls. Being with you is like finally being able to breathe after years of holding my breath." Sun Hee smiled and clinked her glass against his. To breathing freely, to us. They drank, and Jae-won pulled her closer, his hand sliding along her thigh. But as Sun Hee leaned into him, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered something she chose to ignore. Min-jung Park doesn't surrender quietly. She pushed the thought away and lost herself in the moment. Quick reminder, everyone, if you're enjoying this story so far, take 1 second to hit that subscribe button and smash the like. It really helps the channel grow and brings more stories like this to you. Now let's get back to it. The next morning, Min-jung woke at 5 o'clock, just as she always did. But instead of her usual routine of yoga and meditation in the penthouse's private gym, she showered quickly, dressed in a conservative navy suit, and drove herself to the Uido district. The Seoul Metropolitan Police Headquarters building loomed against the gray morning sky, all angular concrete and institutional efficiency. Min-jung parked in the visitor lot and walked through the front entrance with her head held high, carrying a leather briefcase that contained documents she had been quietly collecting for 5 years. Inspector Yoon Sang-chul met her at the security checkpoint and escorted her personally to a private conference room on the 4th floor. He was a tall man in his early 50s, with silver threading through his short-cropped hair and the kind of eyes that had seen too much corruption to be surprised by anything. He carried himself with the quiet authority of someone who had spent decades pursuing the powerful and well-connected. "Mrs. Kang," he said, closing the door behind them. "Please, have a seat. Can I offer you tea? Coffee? Tea would be fine. Thank you." He poured from a pot that was already steeping and set a cup before her. The tea was strong and fragrant. Properly brewed, she noticed. A small detail, but one that told her something about the man she was dealing with. "You said you have information about your husband's business operations," Inspector Yoon began, settling into the chair across from her. "I have to admit, when we met 5 years ago and you decided not to proceed, I was disappointed. I had hoped you would come forward." "I wasn't ready then," Min-jung said simply. "I believed my husband when he told me the irregularities were isolated incidents that had been corrected. I believed in our marriage. I was wrong on both counts." And now, Min-jung opened her briefcase and began laying documents on the table between them. Bank statements, shipping manifests, emails printed and annotated, photographs of meetings that should never have taken place, records of transactions that had been carefully hidden from regulators and investigators. "Now I'm ready to tell you everything." For the next 3 hours, Min-jung walked Inspector Yoon through the evidence she had gathered. She explained how she had first stumbled onto the irregularities during a routine review of some investment documents Jae-won had left in his home office, how she had quietly begun making copies, creating backups, documenting everything, how she had kept silent because she loved her husband and wanted to believe the best of him. The scope of what she revealed was staggering. Jae-won's legitimate business dealings, the shipping company, the import-export operations, the commercial real estate holdings, were only the surface layer of a much darker enterprise. Beneath those respectable facades lay a network of illegal activities that stretched across Asia and beyond. The shipping containers that carried electronics and textiles also carried other cargo that never appeared on official manifests. Some of it was contraband goods evading customs duties. Some of it was worse. The payments that flowed through the company's accounts were carefully layered to hide their true origins and destinations. Money from legitimate sources mingled with money from sources that could never bear scrutiny. Shell companies in Singapore, Hong Kong, and the Cayman Islands served as way stations for funds moving in complex patterns designed to obscure their nature. Government officials received payments disguised as consulting fees. Inspectors who might have asked inconvenient questions found their careers suddenly advancing, or their families receiving unexpected windfalls. A web of corruption spread through multiple agencies and departments, ensuring that Jae-won's operations continued without interference. Inspector Yoon listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious with each revelation. By the time Min-jung finished, the table between them was covered with documents, and the tea had long gone cold. "Mrs.
Kang," he said finally, "do you understand the magnitude of what you're showing me? These allegations, if substantiated, would implicate some of the most powerful people in Korea. I understand perfectly. Your husband is connected. His family has influence. Pursuing this will create powerful enemies." Min-jung met his gaze without flinching. "My husband betrayed me with our housekeeper and told me to accept it or leave.
He looked at me like I was nothing, like 12 years of marriage meant nothing. He has no idea that I know what I know, and he has no idea that I've been documenting everything since the beginning." She paused. "I want immunity for my cooperation. I want protection, and I want to see him face the consequences of his choices." Inspector Yoon studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "I'll need to bring in prosecutors from the Special Investigations Unit. What you've given me today is enough to open a major case, but we'll need to verify everything, build a comprehensive picture, ensure we have enough evidence to withstand legal challenges. I'll cooperate fully. This process will take time, months, possibly longer. During that time, you'll need to be careful. If your husband suspects anything, he won't." Min-jung interrupted. "As far as he's concerned, I'm the obedient wife who accepted his terms. He thinks I'm too weak and too invested in my social position to cause any trouble." A thin smile crossed her lips. "That's exactly what he's going to keep thinking until the moment you put him in handcuffs." Inspector Yoon allowed himself a small smile in return. "I believe we're going to work well together, Mrs. Kang." 3 days passed before Jae-won came home again. Min-jung had spent those days moving through her normal routine with mechanical precision. She attended a charity board meeting. She had lunch with other society wives at an exclusive restaurant in Cheongdam-dong. She oversaw the household management, reviewed menus with the cook, approved schedules with the building's concierge staff. She did not attempt to contact Jae-won. She did not ask where he was or who he was with. She simply continued living her life as if nothing had changed, as if his confession had been absorbed and processed and filed away like any other unpleasant household matter. On the 4th morning, she woke to the sound of the private elevator opening. It was just past 2 in the morning. She lay in bed with her eyes open, listening to his footsteps crossing the marble floors of the living room below. He didn't come upstairs to their bedroom. She heard the sound of the television turning on, the low murmur of some late-night program filtering through the floor. She closed her eyes and went back to sleep. When she rose at 5 for her morning routine, she found him passed out on the living room couch, still wearing the clothes from the night before. An empty whiskey glass sat on the coffee table beside him. His phone had fallen to the floor, the screen dark. Min-jung looked at him for a long moment. This man she had loved, this stranger who wore her husband's face, and felt nothing, not anger, not hurt, just a vast, cold emptiness where her heart used to be. She went for her run. By the time she returned, showered and dressed for the day, in an elegant cream dress and pearls, Jae-won was awake. He sat at the kitchen island, scrolling through his phone, a cup of coffee growing cold beside him. He looked terrible, dark circles under his eyes, his skin carrying a grayish tinge that spoke of too many late nights and too much alcohol. He glanced up when she entered. "Morning, good morning." Her voice was pleasant, neutral, revealing nothing. "There's fresh coffee. I can have the cook make breakfast if you'd like." "I'm not hungry." He set down his phone and studied her, his expression wary, as if he were waiting for something. An accusation, perhaps, an emotional breakdown, something that would confirm his belief that women were fundamentally irrational creatures. Min-jung poured herself a cup of coffee and added a splash of cream, taking her time, making him wait. "What are your plans for the day?" she asked conversationally. "Meetings. The usual. He shifted in his seat. Look, Min-jung, about what I said the other night. What about it? I just want to make sure we're on the same page. About the arrangement. I believe I said fine, didn't I? She took a sip of her coffee, her expression serene. I've had time to think about it, and you're right. A divorce would be messy and public and expensive. Your proposal makes sense from a practical standpoint. Jae-won's eyebrows rose, genuine surprise flickering across his features. You mean it? I'm a practical woman, Jae-won. You've always known that about me. She set down her cup with a soft clink. I suggest we establish some ground rules, however. Discretion above all. Whatever you do with Sun-hee, you keep it away from our social circles. No public appearances, no situations that might lead to gossip or scandal. Of course. That's exactly what I was thinking. Additionally, Sun-hee can no longer work in this household. Her presence here would be inappropriate given the circumstances. I'm sure you can find her alternative accommodations. Jae-won nodded quickly. Already done. I set her up in an apartment in Mapo-gu. She won't be coming back here. Good. Min-jung picked up her coffee again. Then I think we understand each other. For a moment, Jae-won almost looked impressed. You're handling this better than I expected. Did you expect me to cry? To scream? To throw things? A ghost of a smile crossed her lips. I'm not a character in a drama, Jae-won. I'm a businesswoman. I understand how to negotiate unfavorable circumstances. He stood, clearly eager to escape the conversation before it could turn difficult. I should get ready for my meetings. Of course. He headed toward the stairs, then paused, looking back at her. Min-jung, yes? Thank you for being reasonable about this. She held his gaze for a long moment. Of course. What else would I be? As soon as he disappeared upstairs, Min-jung's pleasant expression vanished. She pulled out her phone and sent a brief text to Inspector Yoon. He suspects nothing. Proceeding as planned. The response came within seconds. Excellent. Prosecutors are reviewing documents. We'll update soon. Min-jung deleted both messages and slipped the phone back into her pocket. Then she finished her coffee, checked her schedule for the day, and went about her business as if the world hadn't fundamentally shifted beneath her feet. She had learned something important during her years building Park Medical Technologies. Back before she had sacrificed her ambitions on the altar of marriage, she had learned that the most dangerous opponent was the one who smiled while planning your destruction, the one who appeared reasonable and accommodating while positioning every piece for the final strike. Jae-won thought he had won. He had no idea that he had already lost. 2 weeks later, Min-jung received a call from Elias Grant, a renowned divorce attorney who specialized in high-profile cases involving significant assets and complex international holdings. She had found him through a discreet referral from one of her former business contacts, and his reputation was formidable. Mrs. Kang, Elias said when she arrived at his office, a sleek corner suite in one of Gangnam's most prestigious towers. Thank you for coming. I've reviewed the preliminary information you sent, and I must say, your situation is quite complex. Elias was a tall man with silver-streaked hair and the calm, confident demeanor of someone who had navigated countless legal battles and emerged victorious. His office was decorated with understated elegance. Original artwork on the walls, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Let me be direct, Min-jung said, settling into the leather chair across from his desk. I want a divorce, but I want it done strategically. My husband believes I've accepted an arrangement that allows him to maintain his affair while we remain married for appearances. He has no idea that I intend to end this marriage entirely. Elias nodded thoughtfully. And you want to maintain that illusion while we prepare our case? Exactly. There are also other factors at play. Factors that will become public in the coming months. When they do, I want to be positioned as far from my husband's affairs as possible, both legally and financially. You're referring to the investigation. It wasn't a question. Min-jung's expression didn't change. You've done your research. I make it my business to understand the full picture when representing clients with your level of assets and exposure. Elias leaned forward. The rumors in legal circles suggest that a major case is being built. If your husband is the target of that investigation, your divorce strategy will need to account for potential asset seizures, criminal proceedings, and public relations considerations, which is exactly why I need someone of your caliber. Elias allowed himself a small smile. Then let's discuss how we proceed. For the next 2 hours, they mapped out a comprehensive strategy. Min-jung would continue playing the role of the accommodating wife, while Elias's team quietly gathered financial documentation, established the true scope of marital assets, and prepared divorce filings that could be executed with devastating speed when the moment was right. The key, Elias explained, was ensuring that Min-jung's personal assets, including Park Medical Technologies and several investment accounts she had maintained separately, remained clearly distinct from any holdings that might be subject to seizure or forfeiture in criminal proceedings. Your husband may try to claim that your company's success was dependent on his support during your marriage, Elias warned. He may argue that stepping back from daily operations was a joint decision that entitles him to a share of the company's value. Park Medical Technologies was founded and operational before I ever met Jae-won, Min-jung replied coolly. I have documentation showing that every major innovation and expansion occurred through my own efforts, often while he actively discouraged my involvement in the business. He wanted a society wife, not a competing entrepreneur. Good. That documentation will be valuable. There's something else you should know, Min-jung added. I've traced several large transfers from our joint accounts over the past year, money being moved into accounts I didn't know existed, then transferred again to offshore holdings. Elias's expression sharpened. How much are we talking about? Approximately 850 million won so far. Possibly more. He's been hiding assets. It appears so. Either in preparation for a divorce he anticipated, or simply because he believed I would never notice. Elias made a note on his legal pad. This changes things. We'll need forensic accountants to trace every transfer. If he's been systematically hiding marital assets, that's fraud. It will significantly strengthen your position in divorce proceedings. I want everything documented, Min-jung said. Every one, every transfer, every lie. By the time this is over, I want there to be no question about what kind of man Jae-won Kang really is. Elias studied her for a moment, something like respect flickering in his eyes. Mrs. Kang, if I may be frank, please. In my 30 years practicing family law, I've represented many wealthy women going through difficult divorces. Most of them are angry, hurt, desperate to escape their situations. They react emotionally, make impulsive decisions, and often end up in worse positions than necessary. And you're wondering if I fall into that category. I'm observing that you don't. You're strategic, measured. You're thinking 3 steps ahead while maintaining a facade that keeps your husband complacent. He paused. That's rare. My husband made the mistake of thinking I was just a pretty accessory to his life, Min-jung replied. He forgot that before I was his wife, I was a woman who built a company worth billions from nothing. I didn't accomplish that by being emotional or impulsive. No, Elias agreed. I don't imagine you did. As Min-jung left his office and stepped into the elevator, she felt something she hadn't experienced in weeks. A sense of forward momentum, a feeling that events were finally moving in the direction she intended. Jae-won thought he was in control. He had no idea that control had slipped through his fingers the moment he confessed his betrayal. Across the city, in her new apartment in Mapo-gu, Sun-hee was starting to realize that her dream of becoming the next Mrs. Kang might be more complicated than she had anticipated. Jae-won visited her regularly, but his visits were becoming shorter, his attention more divided. He was distracted constantly, always checking his phone, always worried about something he wouldn't fully explain. When she asked what was bothering him, he waved her off with vague references to business pressures and difficult negotiations. More troubling was the money situation. When Jae-won had set her up in this apartment, he had promised to cover all her expenses. Rent, utilities, a generous monthly allowance for clothing and entertainment. For the first few weeks, the money had flowed freely. Designer bags, spa treatments, expensive dinners at exclusive restaurants. But lately, the allowance had been arriving late. Last week's deposit never came at all. When Sun-hee asked about it, Jae-won had snapped at her in a way he never had before, telling her he was dealing with some cash flow issues and she needed to be patient. Cash flow issues. The man lived in a penthouse worth billions and drove cars that cost more than most apartments, and he was having cash flow issues. Something wasn't right. Sun-hee's phone buzzed with a text from her mother in Busan. Did you send money this month? Rent is due. She stared at the message, her stomach tightening. She had promised to send money home to help with her mother's expenses. It was part of why she had taken the job with the Kangs in the first place. But the truth was, she had been spending everything Jae-won gave her on herself, living the lifestyle she believed she deserved, counting on the larger payoff that would come when she was officially installed as his wife. Now she wasn't sure that payoff was coming at all. She thought about calling Jae-won, demanding answers, but something held her back. There was a coldness in his eyes lately that she hadn't seen before. A distance that made her feel, for the first time, uncertain of her position. Instead, she texted back her mother with a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. We'll send it tomorrow. Then she sat alone in her expensive apartment, surrounded by designer bags and luxury cosmetics, and wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks stretched into months. On the surface, nothing in the Kang household seemed to change. Min-jung continued her routine of charity work and social engagements. Jae-won continued his pattern of late nights and distracted mornings. They moved through the penthouse like ghosts, rarely speaking, rarely acknowledging each other's presence except when necessary. But beneath that surface, invisible machinery was grinding forward. Inspector Yoon's investigation expanded. What had started as a focused inquiry into Jae-won's business practices became a sprawling case involving multiple agencies and jurisdictions. Prosecutors from the Special Investigations Unit pored over the documents Min-jung had provided, cross-referencing them with financial records and surveillance data. Witnesses were identified and quietly approached. The web of corruption that had protected Jae-won's operations for years began to unravel, one thread at a time. Elias Grant's team completed their forensic accounting. The scope of what they uncovered was staggering. Jae-won hadn't just hidden 850 million won. He had systematically siphoned nearly 3 billion won from their marital assets over the past 5 years, funneling it through a maze of shell companies into offshore accounts beyond easy reach of Korean authorities. "He's been planning this for years," Elias told Min-jung during one of their meetings, "long before the affair with your housekeeper. He was positioning himself for a life without you, assuming that when the time came, you would be too naive or too dependent to fight back. He assumed wrong. Indeed he did." Elias slid a thick document across the table. "These are the divorce papers. When you give the word, we can file immediately. Combined with the evidence of asset hiding and the pending criminal investigation, your husband will have no leverage to negotiate favorable terms." Min-jung reviewed the documents carefully. Every clause, every provision had been crafted to protect her interests and maximize her position. The house would be hers. Her company remained entirely separate from any claims he might make. The hidden assets would be subject to recovery proceedings that would drain whatever resources he had left. "Not yet," she said finally. "I want to wait until the investigation is closer to arrests. When everything hits at once, he won't have time to react." Elias nodded. "Timing is everything. I understand." The arrests came on a cold morning in late November. Min-jung was at her clinic. She had returned to active involvement in Park Medical Technologies 3 months earlier, reclaiming her role as CEO to the delight of her board and shareholders, when her phone buzzed with a news alert. Breaking. Prominent Seoul businessman Jae-won Kang arrested in major corruption probe. Multiple charges include money laundering, bribery, and fraud. She read the headline twice, feeling nothing but the cold satisfaction of a strategy executed perfectly. Her phone rang. "Elias, it's happening," he said. "Prosecutors executed search warrants at his office and the penthouse this morning. He was taken into custody at 7:42 a.m. I've already filed the divorce papers. They'll be served at the detention center this afternoon." "Good. The media is going to want a statement from you. You should prepare something. I'll handle it." "Min-jung," Elias's voice softened slightly, "you've handled this entire situation with remarkable composure. I want you to know that whatever happens next, you've protected yourself and your interests better than anyone I've ever seen. Thank you, Elias, for everything." She ended the call and walked to the window of her office. Below, the city hummed with activity, millions of lives intersecting and diverging, unaware of the seismic shift that had just occurred in one small corner of their world. Jae-won Kang, the man who had told her to accept his affair or leave, the man who had looked at her with contempt and called her cold, the man who had stolen from her and lied to her and betrayed every promise he had ever made, that man was now sitting in a detention cell, his empire crumbling around him, and she was free. The trial was held the following spring. The courtroom was packed with reporters, legal observers, and curious members of the public drawn by the scandal's combination of wealth, corruption, and betrayal. Jae-won sat at the defense table, looking diminished in a way Min-jung had never seen before. The tailored suits were gone, replaced by the plain clothing of a defendant. The arrogant confidence had evaporated, leaving behind a hollow-eyed man who seemed to have aged a decade in the span of months. Sun-hee was there too, at a separate table with her own attorney. She faced lesser charges, accessory to money laundering, among others, but her involvement in helping Jae-won hide assets had been thoroughly documented. She kept her eyes down, refusing to look at anyone. Min-jung testified on the 4th day of the trial. She sat in the witness box, calm and composed in a navy suit that projected professional authority, and answered every question with precise, devastating clarity. She explained how she had first discovered the irregularities. She described the documents she had collected and preserved. She walked the court through years of deception, laying out the evidence in a clear, logical progression that left no room for doubt. When the prosecutor asked about her husband's character, Min-jung paused before answering. Jae-won Kang is a man who believes rules don't apply to him. He believes that wealth and connections place him above the law, above basic human decency, above the consequences that ordinary people face for their actions. She looked directly at him for the first time since taking the stand. He was wrong. Jaewon stared back at her, and in his eyes she saw something she had never seen before. Not anger, not contempt, fear. The verdict came 3 weeks later. Guilty on all major counts. Jaewon Kang was sentenced to 18 years in prison. His assets were seized, his business empire dismantled, his reputation destroyed beyond any hope of rehabilitation. Sun Hee received a 4-year sentence. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed around Min Jung, shouting questions about her role in bringing down her husband, about how she felt, about what came next. She paused at the steps and addressed them briefly. I have no desire to celebrate anyone's downfall. What happened here is a tragedy of choices, of consequences, of broken trust. I hope that those involved will use their time to reflect on the harm they caused and find a path toward genuine accountability. She paused. As for me, I intend to focus on my work and my community. That's where my energy belongs. Then she walked to her waiting car and drove away. In the months that followed, Min Jung threw herself into rebuilding, not just her company, but her entire life. Park Medical Technologies expanded into new markets across Southeast Asia. She launched a foundation focused on supporting women entrepreneurs in the biotech sector. She accepted invitations to speak at conferences and universities, sharing her experience with other women who faced obstacles in male-dominated industries. The article in Forbes Korea called her the Phoenix of Korean business. The coverage in international media highlighted her story as an example of resilience and strategic brilliance. But the accolades weren't what mattered to her. What mattered was the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had faced the worst betrayal imaginable and emerged stronger. She had refused to be a victim. She had refused to let her husband's choices define her future. She had taken control of her own narrative and written an ending that no one had expected. One evening, about a year after Jaewon's conviction, Min Jung attended a charity gala at the Grand Hyatt Seoul. The event raised funds for educational programs supporting disadvantaged youth, a cause she had become passionate about. As she moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and engaging in the polite small talk that such events required, she noticed an older woman approaching her. It took a moment to recognize her. Mrs. Kang, Jaewon's mother. The woman had aged dramatically since Min Jung had last seen her. Her hair had gone fully silver, and deep lines of grief carved paths across her face. Min Jung, she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. May I speak with you for a moment? Min Jung nodded and allowed the older woman to guide her to a quieter corner of the ballroom. I owe you an apology, Mrs. Kang began. When everything first happened, I blamed you. I told myself that you must have done something to drive him away, that you were somehow responsible for his choices. She shook her head slowly. I was wrong. I was a foolish old woman who couldn't accept that her son had become a monster. He isn't a monster, Min Jung replied gently. He's a man who made terrible choices and refused to take responsibility for them. There's a difference. Is there? I believe so. Monsters can't change. People can if they're willing to do the hard work. She paused. I don't know if Jaewon is capable of that work, but I hope for your sake that he is. Mrs. Kang's eyes glistened with unshed tears. You're more gracious than I deserve. I'm not gracious, I'm practical. Min Jung touched the older woman's arm briefly. Holding on to anger is exhausting. I've chosen to put my energy into building something positive rather than dwelling on the past. That's not forgiveness. It's just good strategy. A ghost of a smile crossed Mrs. Kang's weathered face. You were always the smart one in that marriage. I just wish I had recognized it sooner. Take care of yourself, Mrs. Kang. Min Jung moved away, returning to the crowd of donors and philanthropists, leaving the past behind her with each step. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon, almost 2 years after the trial. Min Jung was in her office at Park Medical Technologies, reviewing proposals for a new research initiative, when her assistant knocked on the door. There's a call for you. She says her name is Sun Hee Kim. Min Jung stared at her assistant for a long moment. Then she picked up the phone. Hello, Sun Hee. Mrs. Kang. Min Jung. The voice on the other end was barely recognizable. Gone was the confident, scheming woman who had stolen into her marriage. In her place was someone broken, hesitant, stripped of pretense. Thank you for taking my call. I know you have no reason to speak to me. You're right. I don't. But here I am. A long pause. I'm out. I was released early for good behavior. I'm staying with my mother in Busan now, working at a restaurant. It's honest work. Another pause. I called because I needed to apologize. I know it doesn't change anything. I know you probably don't care what I have to say, but I couldn't live with myself if I didn't at least try. Min Jung was silent, letting the words hang in the air. I was young and stupid and greedy, Sun Hee continued.
her voice cracking. I saw your life and I wanted it. I didn't think about you as a person. I just saw you as an obstacle to what I wanted. It was monstrous. I was monstrous. Yes, Minjung agreed quietly. You were. I understand now why you did what you did, why you helped bring him down. He was using both of us. In different ways. He never loved me. I know that now. He was just using me to feel powerful, to prove he could have whatever he wanted. Sun-hee laughed bitterly. I thought I was so clever, stealing someone else's husband. Turns out I was just another fool he manipulated. What do you want, Sun-hee? I don't want anything. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, genuinely sorry, and that I hope, wherever your life takes you, you find the happiness you deserve. Minjung considered the words carefully before responding. I forgive you, Sun-hee. A sharp intake of breath from the other end. You do? Not for your sake, for mine. Carrying anger is heavy, and I've done enough heavy lifting in my life. But understand, forgiveness doesn't mean we're friends. It doesn't mean I'll ever trust you again. It just means I'm choosing to set down the burden of resenting you. She paused. What you do with your life from here is your business. I hope you make better choices. I will, Sun-hee whispered. I promise I will. Goodbye, Sun-hee. Minjung hung up and sat quietly for a moment, processing the conversation. Then she returned to her work. The past was behind her. The future was waiting. 3 years after Jae-won's conviction, Minjung stood on a stage at the World Economic Forum in Davos, addressing an audience of global leaders on the importance of ethical business practices and corporate accountability. The journey from betrayed wife to international thought leader had been long and difficult, but every step had been worth it. She spoke about her own experience, not the salacious details that tabloids love to sensationalize, but the deeper lessons about integrity, resilience, and the courage to stand up for what was right even when the cost seemed too high. We all face moments when our values are tested, she told the audience. Moments when the easy path is to look away, to accommodate, to tell ourselves that someone else will deal with the problem. But those moments define us. They reveal who we truly are when no one is watching. She paused, letting the words settle. I chose to act when I could have chosen silence. I chose transparency when I could have chosen complicity. And yes, the cost was significant. My marriage, my privacy, years of my life consumed by investigations and trials and public scrutiny. But I also gained something precious. I gained the knowledge that I am someone who does the right thing, even when it's hard. That knowledge is worth more than any amount of money or status. The applause that followed was thunderous. After the speech, as she made her way through the crowd of well-wishers and admirers, a woman approached her. Tall, elegant, with silver hair and kind eyes. Dr. Park? The woman said. I'm Dr. Sarah Chen. I run a non-profit focused on supporting women leaders in emerging markets. Your speech was extraordinary. Thank you. Your work sounds fascinating. I wonder if you might consider joining our advisory board. We could use someone with your experience and perspective. Minjung smiled. I'd be honored to discuss it. They exchanged cards and promised to follow up. As Dr. Chen moved away, Minjung found herself thinking about the strange path her life had taken. 10 years ago, she had been a successful businesswoman who chose to step back and support her husband's career. 5 years ago, she had been a betrayed wife discovering the full scope of her husband's deception. 3 years ago, she had been a key witness in one of the largest corruption trials in Korean history. Now she was something else entirely. A symbol of resilience, a voice for accountability, a woman who had turned her worst moment into a platform for positive change. None of it had been easy. All of it had been necessary. A final scene. Minjung sat on the balcony of her new penthouse. She had sold the old one years ago, unable to bear the memories it contained, and watched the sun set over Seoul. The city glittered below her. A tapestry of light and shadow, of ambition and struggle, of countless lives intersecting in ways both seen and unseen. Her phone buzzed. A text from her assistant. The contracts for the Singapore expansion are ready for your review. She would look at them tomorrow. Tonight she wanted to simply sit and breathe and appreciate how far she had come. Jae-won was still in prison. By all accounts, he had not adapted well to his reduced circumstances. The arrogant businessman who had once looked at her with contempt was now just another inmate counting the years until release. Sun-hee was rebuilding her life in Busan, working honest jobs, trying to become a better person. Minjung hoped she would succeed, though she knew it wasn't her concern anymore. And Minjung herself? She was free. Free from a marriage built on lies. Free from the expectations that had constrained her. Free to build a life on her own terms, according to her own values, in pursuit of her own vision of success. Jae-won had told her to handle his affair or leave. She had done both. She had handled it by methodically dismantling every corrupt structure he had built, and then she had left.
not as a defeated woman fleeing a broken marriage, but as a warrior walking away from a battlefield she had conquered. The best revenge she had learned wasn't revenge at all. It was building a life so full of purpose, meaning, and success that the people who had wronged her became nothing more than footnotes in her story. Viewers, this story shows us something powerful about the human spirit. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. When someone treats you like you're worthless, know that their opinion says everything about them and nothing about you. Min Jung could have accepted what Jae-won offered. She could have swallowed her pride, maintained her lifestyle, and lived a lie for the sake of appearances. Many people do exactly that, trading their dignity for comfort, their self-respect for security. She chose differently. She chose to fight. She chose to reclaim her power. She chose to turn devastation into transformation. So let me ask you, have you ever had to walk away from someone or something that was destroying your spirit? Have you ever had to choose the hard path because you knew, deep down, that it was the only path that led somewhere worth going? Drop your stories in the comments. I want to hear from you. And if this story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you of your own strength, hit that subscribe button right now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because we all need reminders sometimes. Reminders that we're stronger than we think. Reminders that we deserve better than settling. Reminders that the best response to betrayal isn't bitterness. It's building something beautiful from the wreckage. Thank you for watching. Until next time, remember, never let anyone make you feel small.